I personally enjoy a good dungeon crawler. However, it's not too often that I stumble across a game that reverses the roles, where you are the dungeon master and are tasked with taking out the heroes. Legend of the Keepers has you do just that, with the ability to kill or scare away adventurers that are out to get your loot. There are several facets of the game that it excels in. However, some weird UI choices and limited replayability in terms of progression keep it from being one of the greats. That being said, at $4.99, you are getting a game that you can easily sink several hours into. Let's break it down. The mechanics of the game are very simple. You are a dungeon master and must stock your rooms with various monsters and traps to stop the different heroes. The two ways to go about this are by killing them, which awards blood that can be used for leveling characters and for certain events that you come across, and the other way of eliminating heroes is by scaring them off by decreasing their morale. This awards you tiers, which can also be used for these different events as well as for leveling up traps. You attempt to make it through several weeks, with each one asking you to choose an event, such as training your current roster, a random encounter that can hurt or help your run, or sending your monsters off on quest for some loot. The list goes on and on. Eventually, you'll reach an encounter with enemy heroes, which have different difficulty ranges and have rewards that scale based off of those difficulties. These rewards can come in the form of monsters, traps, or artifacts. And this is where the game truly comes into its own, as artifacts make or break your run via modifications to interactions between your party and the enemies. Combat works by positioning your characters in one of three spots: front, center, or back. It should be noted that it is in your best interest to check out the attacks of your enemies and align your monsters so that their resistances align with the attacks that they'll be receiving. It's also important to note certain hero abilities, such as those that are going to move your characters before the battle begins. This creates a situation where you can intentionally place them in less than ideal spots and increase the odds of them being placed in the correct spot as a byproduct of this reorganization. To end a run, you will have to fight a group that has a champion, who is typically both very strong and has a unique ability that makes it more than cumbersome than your usual heroes. For example, this character will stun your monster in the back if they have 2 or more negative penalties. More often than not, this will happen, causing my backline character to be perma-stunned, and this was something that I had to keep in mind. There are 3 masters or main characters to choose from, with each one having unique monsters available to them. Upon leveling a master, you'll gain skill points that can be used to add some persistent perks to your run. These can easily be removed and redistributed at will. Each master has access to 5 chapters of increasing difficulty, and each starting you with some item to shape your run. Upon completion, you gain access to an endless mode, which is exactly what it sounds like, an ascension mode, which increases difficulty modifiers, and 2 additional chapters that often have unique monsters. Completing the main quest missions will grant you access to items and monsters that can be used in future runs. Lastly, you can adjust the difficulty for more or less XP. I will say that the normal difficulty can be pretty tough, so kudos to the developers for actually making a game challenging. Runs, in general, typically last about 30 minutes. So what does the game do well? In terms of design, the main characters, enemies, and heroes are all unique and really well made. While there are some standouts, most can be very useful given the situation. I often found myself gravitating towards certain monsters, more or less, depending on whether I was going for a build that was focused on killing or scaring away heroes. Another thing that I would like to mention is the scaling of levels. I felt that there was a fairly good scaling of difficulty from the first mission for a master to the last. Also, forcing a player to begin with items that they might not take in a normal run was perfectly executed. The last big pro was the gameplay loop is enjoyable. Although it can be quite a bit to manage on your first couple of runs, trying to manage position, scope out the hero's attacks and passives, and manage your own monster's morales. Eventually, you'll find yourself in a flow and it becomes a lot easier and more enjoyable. Some of the unlockables for completing certain runs, such as characters and traps, felt really rewarding, as you would often see them in your next run and get to try out these new monsters. There are some pretty big design issues that keep it from being a must-play and a game that can be enjoyed for a long time. The first is that after completing all of the main world missions, I never found myself wanting to go back and try out the Endless or Ascension mode. This is in large part because I did not find enough variety in terms of the items that are available to the players. While these can be game-changing, I often found myself running into the same ones. I felt like there needed to be a lot more and have them synergize with each other a bit more in order to make me want to keep coming back. Another design issue was that you cannot change your character rooms while in an event. I get why you can't do this during combat, but even after several hours, I kept finding myself wanting to change the rooms and monsters after I upgraded them without leaving the upgrade screen. The last thing that I would like to have the ability to change is the rooms that monsters are in mid-combat. Here, I mean before combat begins, but after you have the chance to see the enemies and their strengths and weaknesses. I felt like this could have added a level of strategy that was missing. I often found like certain compositions in the second room were better than those in the first, and considering that resources are fairly slim, especially on harder difficulties, you cannot have every room be completely well-rounded while at the same time being viable. Overall, I think that Legend of the Keepers has enough unique characteristics to more than justify its asking price of $5. I was able to log 15 hours into it before completing the entire main mission campaign, and to be honest, it's likely not going to be a game that I will be revisiting, but it was enough fun in the time that I played it. It is available on both the Google Play Store and iOS, and if you have any recommendations for me to review, leave it in the comments section below. Otherwise, stay tuned in to Gaming in the Moment.